Hello coders, this video is coming to you per the request of Zekromanian. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, by the way. Yeah, so we're taking video requests now, so feel free, please, if you guys have an idea for something, go ahead and just shout it out in the comment section. Tell us what you guys want to learn, and we will try to do that video for you. So today we're going to be talking about object instantiation. And I thought that, this is a common case where we're spawning projectiles from a gun or something, so I thought it might be cool if I made this little cannon here, and what we're going to do is shoot cannonballs from it via object instantiation through a script. Okay, so what I went ahead and did was we have our cannon barrel here, which is what's going to be rotating. I put a cannon controller on it, so this is going to be controlling the rotation. I'll go ahead and show you guys that, but we're not going to talk about in detail what's going on with it. Okay, so here's our cannon controller. This is going to be handling the rotation of the barrel. Go ahead and take a quick look at it if you want to copy this code. If you guys want to do a similar sort of cannon setup. I'm going to go ahead and go over to the cannon shooter now. This is what's going to be controlling how we instantiate objects at runtime. Okay, so let's start off from the top. We want to have a reference to our cannonball prefab in this. So this is the object that we're going to be instantiating, and again I reiterate, this needs to be a prefab. Okay, so we have a prefab called cannonball, and what we're going to be doing is shooting it from the barrel, and so I have this shot force variable here, and we can change this through the inspector because it's public. Then we have a cooldown variable, and this is going to be determining how fast we can shoot one projectile. So we don't want to have a bunch of projectiles, a bunch of cannonballs just shooting out of it. Or maybe you do, so you can adjust that variable if you want to. And then what we're going to have is a GameObject cannonball, and this is lowercase c. Notice how these are different names. And what this is it's going to be a reference to our prefab. Okay, so more on that in a second. Then we're going to have a float fire, and this fire is going to be holding our input value. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then we have finally a shot timer. Now the shot timer is going to be what's counting to see if we reach the cooldown to determine if we can shoot or not. So this shot timer is going to be counting up and up and up until we reset it. Okay, so in update, we are updating the fire input. So we're looking for input and putting it into this fire variable. Notice that I'm saying input.getAccessRaw. Basically, whenever you have these input settings, and let me go ahead and show you guys the input settings. I'm going to come over here to edit, and then project settings, and then input. And then I'm going to come over and we're going to see the input manager. We have axes over here. And so these are default axes. You don't have to worry about setting these up. And these are all of your input values. So our first input name is fire1, and this is the one I'm accessing. And you can see that you have one positive button for left control. So you can press left control, or you can press mouse 0, which is left click. Okay, so this is the value that I'm getting. And the way it works is if we go back over to our script. So when I say input.getAccess, I can say getAccess, or I can say getAccessRaw. Now if I say getAccess, what it's doing is it's getting a value from -1 to 1 interpolated. So the value at any time could be 0.4 or 0.5 or 0.6. When I say getAccessRaw, it's only going to get hard values. So it's either going to be -1, 0, or 1. Actually, with this case, it's only going to be 0 or 1 because there's no negative input for it. It's just mouse click. So this value is either going to be 0 if we're not clicking, or 1 if we are clicking. Okay, so that covers the input, how we're getting the input. Shot timer plus equals time.delta time. So this is going to be counting up to see if we can shoot yet. Let's go on down to fixed update, and I'll explain why this is in fixed update in just a second. Okay, so sorry about that. So we're going to have if fire equals 1, so if we're shooting, so if we're clicking, and shot timer is greater than or equal to cooldown timer. Okay, so again, this is just checking if we can shoot yet. And then if both of those scenarios are true, then we're going to spawn a new ball. And don't forget to reset the shot timer so that we can shoot again. If we don't reset the shot timer, then we're just going to constantly be able to keep shooting. So if we reset the shot timer, we're going to have to count back up to our cooldown value before we can shoot again. So don't forget to do that. So the spawn new ball. And the reason this is in fixed update is because we are dealing with physics slightly. I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary because we aren't constantly really updating any physics, but we are using physics, so it's good practice to just use fixed update anytime we are using it. Okay, so let's break down the spawn new ball. This is what the tutorial is surrounded by, so I'm going to talk heavily on it. So this creates a new game object. Okay, so this line right here, cannonball equals GameObject.instantiate. So cannonball is the reference to the prefab that I was talking about. Then we say GameObject.instantiate, and then what we're going to pass is cannonball. This is the actual prefab that we're going to assign via the inspector panel. And then we have to specify the type. So we're going to say cannonball as GameObject. So since cannonball is a game object, we want to instantiate the prefab as a game object. So that's what that line means. Now the rest of these lines down here are basically the settings that we want to initialize our prefab with, or our game object with. So we create the cannonball, but we have no idea where this cannonball is going to spawn. So we're going to have to set a position for it, okay? And since this script is attached to the cannon, what I can do is say cannonball.transform.position equals transform.position. So this transform.position is referring to the cannon's transform because that's what the script is attached to. So what we're going to do is initialize the cannonball at the cannon's position, okay? And then what we do is we have to access the rigid body of the cannonball. So whenever we create the cannonball, we're going to have to attach a rigid body to it so that we can actually add this force, since add force is a member of rigid body. Okay, so we say rigid body equals cannonball.getComponent rigid body. So this get component does what the name suggests. It's just going to look through all the components on this cannonball object and see if it has a rigid body. If it does, we're going to say our body, which is the reference to our rigid body, our body.addForce, which is a member of rigid body. And then we're going to give it a direction, transform.forward times shot force, which is what we specified up here. And then we can specify a force mode. So there's several different force modes we can choose from. Force mode dot, and we can have acceleration, force, impulse, velocity change. I'm pretty sure force is default, so I'm going to go ahead and just put that in there. So the transform.forward, basically you're going to see that the cannon is actually going to be able to rotate, and whichever direction the cannon is facing is going to be its forward vector. So this forward vector is ever changing, and then we're going to multiply that by our shot force. Okay. Remember in a previous tutorial I talked about how you have multiple coordinate systems. Well, this is the cannon's local coordinate forward vector. Okay, so that's about it. Let's go back to our Unity project. And what we need to do here, as you can see, we're missing a reference. We have a missing reference exception, and it's because we don't have a cannonball prefab yet. So let's create one. So what I'm going to do is come up here to GameObject, create new 3D object, and click. Let's do a sphere, since that makes sense. That's what a ball looks like. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the sphere onto the cannon barrel because that's where it's going to be spawning from. And I'm just going to reset the position to 0, 0, 0. This is just so I can see the cannon ball a little bit quicker, so I don't have to actually drag it towards my view. Okay, I took it off the child. I removed it as a child of the barrel because we don't really need it to be that. And I'm just going to name this prefab. It's going to be called cannonball. Okay, and I have a material for it, so I'm just going to drag that on there. Okay, and remember I said that the cannonball needs to have a rigid body because we're adding force to it. So I'm going to just put a rigid body on there, and that's all I need to do with that. Okay, and all I did to do that was I went to add component on the cannonball, and I went to physics, and then I went to rigid body. So that's how you do that. Okay. I believe this is it. So all I'm going to do to make this a prefab is I'm going to click it from the hierarchy and drag it into my prefabs folder. Okay. Now I can delete the hierarchy ball, the cannonball, and go to my cannon barrel. Here is where I have my cannon shooter. So this is the script we just reviewed. And so what I need to do is take the cannonball prefab and drag it over to that cannonball slot. So this cannonball reference is directly referring to this public game object cannonball. Okay. So I believe that's all we need to do. Let's see if we have any surprises here. I'm going to go ahead and maximize on play and run it. Okay, so you can see I'm simply using the arrow keys here to rotate the object, to rotate the cannon barrel, and I should be able to just click to spawn a new ball. And there we go. So what I'm doing is I'm spawning it, and you can see that it's always shooting in the direction that the barrel is facing. That's what that transform.forward does. So again, we have this local coordinate system concept, and so any way that this is facing, it's referring to the transform.forward of the barrel. So that's why it's always able to shoot in that direction and add force in that direction. Okay, guys? So that's pretty much going to cover it. Actually, there's one more thing I want to talk about. Let me not maximize on play and check out the hierarchy over here when I'm shooting these. Okay, and I'm actually holding the fire button now, so you can see that it's shooting balls about every 1 second, which is what we specified. But look over here in the hierarchy. You can see that we are just spawning all of these objects. This can get cluttered really quick if we have a game where we're just shooting a ton of projectiles. So we need to have some way of destroying our game object over time. So I went ahead and I created a little script, and it's called Object Destroyer. So go ahead and go to right-click your project panel and go to Create and create a new C# script for this. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our scripts, go to Object Destroyer, and this is what I created. So I have a public float lifespan. We're going to specify how long we want the object to be alive from the time it's instantiated. And then we have a life timer. This is the value that's going to be counting up to see if we've reached our lifespan. And then come down to the update function. We have life timer plus equals time.delta time. So this is going to be constantly increasing by this built-in timer. And then we're just going to say if the timer is greater than the lifespan, then we want to destroy the game object. And that's going to do away with it. Okay, so let's come over to Unity again. And what we want to do is find our prefab, click on it, and then go to our scripts and drag our object destroyer onto that prefab. And set your lifespan to whatever you want. I'm going to set it to 5. Then if I run the game again, you can see that as I'm shooting, give it about 5 seconds, and you'll see over here in the hierarchy they start to get deleted. They start to get destroyed. Okay, so you can see at this rate I'm probably never going to have more than about 4 cannonballs in my scene at one time, so that's going to increase performance. Okay, alright guys, that was pretty much it. I hope you guys learned how to instantiate your own objects. Again, this was a video per request of Zekromanian, so if you guys have any other videos that you would like to see, go ahead and post it in the comment section. As always, this has been a Renaissance Coders tutorial. Thanks for watching.